The old hands trembled as they gripped the pen. Not from age, though 73 years had carved deep lines into the knuckles. Not from fear, though death sat in the chair beside him like an old friend waiting patiently for the conversation to end. The trembling came from rage, from the particular fury of a man who has spent a lifetime teaching truth only to watch lies win. Thomas Brennan pressed the pen to paper. The notebook was cheap, spiral-bound, bought from a gas station on the Wyoming border. The kind of thing a man purchases when he knows his time is measured in weeks, not months. Inexpensive leather journals seemed like vanity. He wrote in block letters, the way he had taught recruits to mark range cards in conditions where cursive would blur into illegibility. Maya, if you're reading this, I'm gone. You'll want revenge, don't. But if you must, here's how. His daughter would not listen to the first part. He knew her too well. She had his stubbornness without the decade of compromise that had slowly eroded his own sharp edges. She would want blood. She would want the men who destroyed him to feel what he had felt. So he gave her the second part, the how. Because if she was going to walk into hell, she would damn well walk in prepared. The pen moved across the page for another 40 minutes. When he finished, Thomas Brennan closed the notebook, placed it in a manila envelope marked evidence in his careful hand, and set it on the small table beside his hospital bed. Then he reached for the call button. Not yet. He had one more thing to do. Thomas pulled the phone from the nightstand drawer and scrolled through contacts until he found a name he had not called in 8 years. His thumb hovered over it for a long moment, then pressed. 3 rings. 4. Hello? The voice on the other end was older now, weathered by time and rank, but Thomas would have recognized it in a crowd of thousands. Jack, Thomas said. His voice was thin, worn down by the cancer eating through his lungs. I need you to do something for me. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Jack Rhodes finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of 8 years of guilt. Anything, Tom, name it. Thomas looked at the envelope on the table, at the rifle case leaning against the wall, at the photograph of his daughter taped to the wall, 23 years old in that picture, smiling in a way she had not smiled since the day the discharge papers arrived. When Maya comes to you, Thomas said, and she will come, don't turn her away. I don't understand. You will, Thomas said. When she shows up at your gate with my rifle and a letter you won't want to read. When she demands things you can't give. Don't turn her away, Jack. She's going to finish what I started, and you're going to help her. Rhodes was quiet for a long time. Is this about Stahl? He finally asked. Thomas closed his eyes. Even saying the name out loud took effort now. It was always about Stahl, Thomas said. I just ran out of time to prove it. Tom, if you have evidence, send it to IG. Let me help you now. We can... I'm dying, Jack. I've got maybe 2 weeks, maybe less. By the time IG moves, I'll be gone, and Stahl will bury it like he buried everything else. Thomas paused to catch his breath. But Maya won't let it stay buried. She's got my blood. She'll dig until she hits bone. What do you want me to do? Thomas opened his eyes and stared at the ceiling. The water stain in the corner looked like a bird in flight if you squinted hard enough. I want you to do what you should have done in 2015, Thomas said quietly. Stand with her when it costs you something. The line went silent. Thomas could hear Rhodes breathing on the other end, could almost see the man's face going through the same calculation it had gone through 9 years ago when he signed the discharge papers. Career versus conscience. Safety versus honor. I'll be there, Rhodes said finally. When she comes, I'll be there. Good, Thomas said. He felt the exhaustion pulling at him now, the morphine they had given him earlier beginning to cloud the edges of his vision. One more thing, Jack. What? The rifle in my closet, the sharps. When I'm gone, it's yours. Hold on to it. When Maya needs it, you'll know. Tom, I can't. You can. You will. It's already in my will. Thomas took a shallow breath. Tell her I was right about everything. Tell her the math doesn't lie. Tell her to trust what I taught her. I will. Thomas closed his eyes again. The bird on the ceiling was flying away now, disappearing into the white. Goodbye, Jack. Tom, wait! But Thomas had already hung up. He died 11 days later. He never picked up the pen again. 6 years, 3 months, and 2 days after Thomas Brennan was laid to rest in a small cemetery outside Sheridan, Wyoming, his daughter drove through the front gate of Fort Carson, Colorado, in a truck that had survived 3 owners and countless Wyoming winters. The truck was brown, or had been brown once. Now it was the color of rust and regret, with a passenger mirror held in place by electrical tape and a rear bumper that had taken a hit from something large enough to leave a dent the size of a basketball. Maya Brennan stepped out into the cold morning air at precisely 6:30. She was 32 years old and looked like someone who had spent those years working with her hands. No makeup, no jewelry except a small silver chain around her neck that held her father's dog tags. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, light brown shot through with sun-bleached streaks that caught the early light and turned them briefly gold. She wore canvas work pants, boots that laced to mid-calf, and a jacket that had seen better decades. On her back, slung across one shoulder on a worn leather strap, was a rifle that belonged in a museum. The Sharps 1874 Buffalo rifle was a work of functional art. 50 inches of steel and walnut, chambered in 45-70 government, capable of dropping a 2,000-pound bison at 600 yards or putting a round through a man's chest at twice that distance. The brass fittings along the stock gleamed dully in the morning sun. The octagonal barrel was smooth and dark, polished by 100,000 careful cleanings. It was the rifle her father had carried for 40 years. The rifle he had used to teach her everything she knew about wind, distance, and the particular mathematics that turned a lump of lead into truth, delivered at the speed of sound. She walked to the guard shack with the unhurried pace of someone who had driven 9 hours through the night and was in no mood for bureaucracy. Private First Class Dennis Yates was 20 years old and had been stationed at Fort Carson for exactly 4 months. He had processed hundreds of visitors through the gate in that time. Contractors, family members, delivery drivers, occasionally a lost tourist who had taken a wrong turn off Highway 115. He had never processed anyone who looked like they had just stepped out of a Frederick Remington painting. Yates came out of the shack as Maya approached. His hand moved instinctively toward his sidearm, then stopped when he saw she was making no threatening moves. Just walking. Steady, eyes forward. "Ma'am," Yates said when she stopped 3 feet from him, "this is a restricted military installation. Do you have authorization to be here?" Maya reached into her jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. Not new, bent at the corners, the kind of thing that had lived in a glove compartment for a long time. "For Colonel Rhodes," she said. Her voice was flat, matter-of-fact, the tone of someone delivering information rather than making requests. "Tell him Thomas Brennan's daughter is here to collect a debt." Yates took the envelope. He looked at it, then at her, then at the rifle on her back. "Ma'am, I can't just—" "Open it," Maya said. Yates hesitated, then broke the seal. Inside was a single piece of paper folded once. He unfolded it. The message was short, handwritten in block letters that were slightly shaky, as if written by someone whose hands no longer fully obeyed. "Jack, by the time you read this, I'm gone. Maya knows what you did in 2015. She knows what you chose. If you want a chance to choose differently, let her through the gate. If not, live with it. Your call. Thomas." Yates read it twice. His face went pale. "Wait here," he said, his voice suddenly tight. He turned and went back into the shack. Through the window, Maya could see him picking up the phone, dialing with fingers that fumbled the buttons twice before getting it right. He spoke into the receiver for maybe 20 seconds, listened, spoke again, his free hand gesturing at nothing in particular. Then he stopped moving entirely, the phone pressed to his ear, his eyes locked on Maya through the window. He hung up. When he came back out, he would not quite meet her eyes. "Colonel Rhodes will be here in 5 minutes, Yates said. He asks that you wait." Maya said nothing. She walked to the side of the road and leaned against the hood of her truck, the rifle still across her back, arms folded, watching the road that led into the base. 4 minutes and 30 seconds later, a black SUV came down the access road doing 40 in a 25 zone. It stopped hard enough that the tires chirped against the pavement. The man who got out was 51 years old and looked like he had earned every year of it. Colonel Jack Rhodes wore ACUs that were pressed sharp enough to cut paper, boots polished to a mirror shine, and the kind of bearing that came from 3 decades of telling people what to do and having them do it. His hair was gray at the temples, his face weathered by sun and wind and the particular stress that came with command. He stopped 10 feet from Maya and stared at her like he was seeing a ghost. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The wind moved through the scrub brush along the fence line. Somewhere in the distance, a drill instructor was shouting cadence. "You shouldn't be here," Rhodes said finally. Maya pushed off the truck and stood up straight. She was not tall, maybe 5'6", but she held herself in a way that made height irrelevant. "You owe my father 9 years of his life," Maya said. Her voice was cold and level. each word enunciated with the precision of someone who has rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in her head. I'm here to collect, in blood or in honor. Your choice. Rhodes flinched like she had hit him. His jaw tightened. What do you want? A chance to shoot us near range. If I outshoot your best sniper, you read this letter out loud in front of your entire unit. She pulled a second envelope from her jacket, thicker than the first, sealed with tape. Rhodes stared at the envelope like it was a live grenade. I can't read that, he said quietly. Then I'll read it myself, Maya said, after I destroy your best shooter, and your career along with it. Maya, don't! The word came out sharp as a blade. Don't say my name like you have the right to use it. You gave up that right the day you signed his discharge papers. Rhodes looked down at the pavement. When he looked back up, something in his face had shifted. Not surrender exactly, but acceptance. You think I don't carry that every day? He said. You think I don't see his face every time I sign a training roster? Every time I watch some kid who can't read wind past 300 meters because all he knows is what his scope tells him? I think you chose your career over your principles, Maya said. I think you let a good man get destroyed because it was easier than standing with him. Rhodes took a step closer. His voice dropped low enough that Yates, standing by the guard shack, could not hear. Your father called me the night before he died, Rhodes said. Did you know that? He told me you would come. He told me not to turn you away. He paused. He also told me to help you finish what he started. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to come through that gate. You're going to shoot on my range. And when you beat my best sniper, because we both know you will, I'm going to do exactly what you ask. Maya studied his face for a long moment. Why? Because your father was right about everything, Rhodes said. And I was a coward. And maybe this is my chance to be something other than that. He turned and walked back to his SUV, opened the door, looked back at her. Follow me, he said. We've got work to do. Maya got in her truck. The engine turned over on the third try, coughing black smoke that smelled like burning oil and bad decisions. She followed Rhodes through the gate, past the guard shack, onto the base proper. Yates watched them go. When they were out of sight, he picked up the phone again and dialed a different number. This one rang 8 times before someone answered. Sir, Yates said, we have a situation. The primary marksmanship range at Fort Carson sat on 1,200 acres of high desert scrubland northeast of the main post. It was a place of long sight lines and longer silences, broken only by the crack of rifles and the occasional curse of a trainee who had just learned that a scope could not compensate for poor fundamentals. 6 men were waiting when Rhodes and Maya arrived. They stood in a loose cluster near the equipment shed, some leaning against walls, others sitting on ammo crates. All of them watching the vehicles approach with the wary interest of soldiers who sense that their routine is about to be interrupted. Rhodes got out first. Maya followed, pulling the sharps from the truck bed and slinging it across her back in one smooth motion. The reaction was immediate. Sergeant Derek Hollis straightened up from where he had been leaning against the shed wall. He was 29 years old, 6'2", built like someone who spent his off hours in the weight room because it was easier than spending them thinking. His eyes locked onto the rifle and stayed there. Is that a Sharps 1874, confirmed Lieutenant Evan Keller from his position near the firing line. Keller was 35, thin and precise, with the kind of face that looked like it belonged in a library rather than on a rifle range. 4570 government, Buffalo gun, late 19th century. She brought a Buffalo gun to a precision rifle range, Hollis said slowly, as if testing the words to see if they made any more sense spoken aloud. Appears so, said Corporal Mira Santos. She was 26, compact and watchful, with black hair pulled back in a regulation bun and eyes that missed nothing. She had been studying Maya since the moment the truck pulled up, cataloging details the way a good investigator cataloged evidence. Something about the woman's bearing, the way she carried herself, seemed familiar in a way Santos could not quite place. Rhodes walked to the center of the group. The morning sun was climbing higher now, burning off the last of the coolness, promising heat later. Gentlemen, Shah, Rhodes said, then, with a nod to Santos. Corporal, we have a guest this morning. Miss Maya Brennan, she's requested range time. Sir, Hollis said carefully, civilians require authorization for... I'm aware of the regulations, Sergeant. I'm granting authorization under my authority as range commander. On what grounds, sir? Rhodes met Hollis's eyes. Personal grounds, he said. Miss Brennan's father was a colleague of mine. She's here to demonstrate his training methods. Keller stirred. Something in his posture shifted. Sir, Keller said slowly, what was her father's name? Rhodes paused. Just for a second. But in that second, Maya saw him make a choice. Thomas Brennan, Rhodes said, Chief Warrant Officer, served with the Army Marksmanship Unit from 2004 to 2015. The name landed like a stone in the still water. Keller's face went carefully blank. Santos straightened slightly. Even Hollis, who had no reason to recognize the name, seemed to sense that something significant had just been said. The calibration, Keller said softly. Maya turned to look at him. Keller met her gaze and nodded once, a gesture of respect from someone who recognized lineage when he saw it. You know the name, Maya said, not a question. I've seen the film, Keller said. 1,200 meters, iron sights, 8 for 8. AMU used to show it during advanced courses. Unofficially, most people thought it was faked. It wasn't, Maya said. No, Keller agreed. I don't suppose it was. Hollis looked between them, frustration creeping into his expression. Someone want to explain what we're talking about? Later, Rhodes said. Right now, we have a demonstration to run. Sergeant Hollis, you're up. 300 meters, iron sights only. Hollis stared at him. Sir, I don't train iron sights. None of us do. It's not in the curriculum. It is now, Rhodes had said. Get your rifle. Remove the optic. Sir, that's an order, Sergeant. Hollis's jaw tightened, but he moved, walked to the equipment shed, and came back with his rifle. A Barrett M8 2A1 50 caliber, topped with a Leupold Mark 4 scope worth more than most people's monthly rent. He set it on the bench and began removing the scope with movements that were just slightly too rough. Careful, Rhodes said mildly. That equipment is taxpayer property. Hollis said nothing. He finished removing the scope and set it aside, then picked up the rifle. Without the optic, the Barrett looked naked, unfinished. Target at 300, Rhodes called out. Standard paper, 5 rounds. Sergeant Hollis will shoot first. 2 of the younger soldiers jogged down range and clipped fresh targets to the frames at the 300-meter line. When they were clear, Rhodes raised his hand. Range is hot. Sergeant Hollis, at your discretion. Hollis moved to the firing line. He went prone, the Barrett's bipod extending with a metallic click. He settled in behind the rifle, eyed to the receiver where the scope should have been, trying to line up iron sights he had not used since basic training. The first shot cracked out across the valley. Hollis worked the bolt, ejecting the spent brass, chambering another round. Fired again. 3 more times in quick succession. When he was done, Santos called the shots through a spotting scope. 2 hits, center mass, 1 high right, 2 misses, off paper entirely. Hollis stood up. His face was red. 300 meters, iron sights, cold bore, wind at 8 miles per hour, he said defensively. That's a passing standard for what? Maya asked. She had been standing to the side, watching, saying nothing. Now she stepped forward. For someone who doesn't know what they're doing, is that the standard now? Hollis turned to her. His eyes were hard. You think you can do better? I know I can, Maya said. She walked to the firing line, unslung the sharps. The rifle was heavy, nearly 10 pounds unloaded, and she handled it with the casual ease of someone who had carried it over mountains. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a leather pouch. From it, she withdrew a single brass cartridge. Not factory ammunition, hand-loaded. The bullet was cast lead, slightly irregular, made in a mold over a fire the way they had done it for 150 years. She loaded the cartridge into the breech. Closed the action. The mechanism was simple, elegant, a falling block design that had been proven in the 1870s and remained unchanged because there was nothing to improve. Maya knelt, not prone, just a simple kneeling position, one knee on the ground, the rifle pulled tight to her shoulder. She did not hurry. She looked down range at the target. Then she looked at the grass halfway to the target, then at the grass at the target line, reading the wind not with instruments, but with eyes that had been trained to see what most people could not. 30 seconds passed, then she fired. The sharps had a sound unlike any modern rifle, a deep, rolling crack that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than the barrel. Black powder smoke bloomed from the muzzle in a white cloud that hung in the air for a heartbeat before the wind took it. Santos was already on the spotting scope. Hit, she said, dead center. Maya loaded again, same deliberate sequence. Powder, ball, ram, prime. She fired, reloaded, fired. 5 times total, 5 identical motions. 5 for 5, Santos said quietly. All center mass, 4 of them touching. Hollis stared at the target, then at Maya, then at the rifle in her hands. That's impossible, he said. No, Maya said. She stood up, brushing dust from her knee. That's training. The kind your curriculum apparently doesn't include anymore. She turned to Rhodes. 600 meters, she said, same terms. Rhodes opened his mouth like he was going to object, then closed it. He looked at Hollis. Sergeant? Hollis's hands were clenched into fists. His face had gone from red to white. Set the target, he said. They set the target. 600 meters was no longer a distance where you could see bullet holes with the naked eye. Santos stayed on the spotting scope. The rest of the team gathered closer, pretending they had things to do nearby, but really just wanting to watch. Hollis shot first again. With iron sights at 600 meters, he was essentially guessing. The front sight blade covered the entire target. Wind was variable. He fired 5 rounds and hit the target twice, both shots high and outside the scoring rings. He stood up without a word and walked away from the line. Maya took his place. She spent longer reading the wind this time, a full minute of watching the grass, the dust devils forming and dissipating in the middle distance, the way the heat shimmer moved across the valley floor. Then she loaded and fired. 5 rounds, 5 deliberate, unhurried shots. Santos's voice came flat and professional from behind the scope. 5 hits, 4 in the black, 1 just outside, group size approximately 8 inches. One of the younger soldiers, a private named Chen, who had been watching from near the equipment shed, let out a low whistle. At 600 meters with iron sights, he said to nobody in particular, that's sniper-qualified shooting. Keller was nodding slowly. He had moved closer without seeming to move at all, the way people do when they see something that demands their full attention. Your father taught you, he said to Maya. Not a question. Every day for 8 years, Maya said. She was reloading the sharps, her hands moving through the sequence without needing to look. From the time I was 14 until the day he was discharged. After that, he had more time, so we trained more. What did he teach you? Keller asked. Maya looked at him. Really looked at him like she was deciding whether he was worth answering. He taught me that a scope is a crutch, she said. Useful, but a crutch. He taught me that wind is a language most people never learn to read because they let machines read it for them. He taught me that distance is just math, and math doesn't care what century your rifle was made in. She closed the breech on a fresh round. He taught me that the Army was training technicians instead of marksmen, she said, and that when the technology fails, the technician fails with it. But a marksman who knows the fundamentals can make the shot with anything. Is that why they discharged him? Santos asked. She had stepped away from the spotting scope. Her voice was carefully neutral, but there was something underneath it, a personal interest that went beyond professional curiosity. They discharged him because he was right, Maya said, and being right made him inconvenient. Rhodes had been standing off to the side, arms crossed, watching everything with the expression of a man witnessing a car accident in slow motion. Now he stepped forward. Miss Brennan, he said, you've made your point. You can shoot. Everyone here acknowledges that. I haven't made my point yet, Maya said. She turned to face him fully. My point isn't that I can shoot. My point is that my father could teach, and you destroyed him for it. The range went quiet. Even the wind seemed to pause. That's not what happened, Rhodes said quietly. No? Maya's voice was level, but there was something underneath it now, something sharp. You signed the papers. You chose your career over his. That's exactly what happened. You don't know what I chose, Rhodes said. You don't know what the options were. Then tell me. Rhodes looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at his men, all of them watching now, all pretense of work abandoned. Not here, he said. Yes, here, Maya said. Right here, in front of these men who carry on the tradition my father tried to fix. Tell them what you chose. Rhodes's jaw tightened. For a moment, Maya thought he was going to refuse. Then something in his face shifted. Your father filed a report in 2015, Rhodes had said. A complaint against a superior officer. Someone above my rank. Someone with enough power to make problems disappear. The officer in question wanted your father court-martialed for insubordination and theft of classified materials. What materials? Evidence, Rhodes said. Evidence of wrongdoing that your father had collected over the course of a year. The officer wanted him in Leavenworth for 10 years minimum. I couldn't stop the discharge, but I could stop the court-martial. So I made a deal. Your father took a quiet discharge, no criminal charges, no record that would follow him, and the evidence disappeared. Maya stared at him. You made him take the fall. I kept him out of prison, Rhodes has said. You were 23 years old. You needed him. I chose to give you 8 more years with your father instead of watching him spend 10 years in a cell. And the evidence, the wrongdoing he was trying to expose? Rhodes said nothing. That's what I thought, Maya said softly. You protected a criminal to save your career. I protected your father to save his life, Rhodes said. His voice was rising now, the careful control slipping. You think I wanted to sign those papers? You think I slept well after? I made a choice. Maybe it was the wrong choice, but it's the choice I made, and I've lived with it every single day since. Maya's hand went to the envelope in her jacket. She pulled it out. Then live with this, she said. She opened the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a letter handwritten in the same careful block letters as the note Yates had seen at the gate. She began to read aloud. To Colonel Jack Rhodes, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I don't blame you for 2015. I did for a while, but I understand now what you were trying to do. You thought you were saving me. Maybe you were iPhone, but you also let something evil walk free. And that evil is still walking, still hurting people, still destroying careers like it destroyed mine. I can't fight it anymore. But Maya can. Help her finish what I started. Not because you owe me, because it's the right thing to do. Because being right isn't enough. You have to be brave enough to stand by it. I wasn't talking about the scopes, Jack. I was talking about Stahl. You know I was. You've always known. Don't let him win. Thomas Brennan. Maya lowered the letter. The range was absolutely silent. Who, she said very quietly, is Stahl? Keller's face had gone white. Santos had straightened like someone had put an electric current through her spine. Even Hollis, who had been standing apart with his arms crossed, had turned to stare at Rhodes. Rhodes looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 seconds. Lieutenant General Marcus Stahl, he said, his voice sounded hollow. Deputy Commander, Army Modernization Command. Pentagon, he was the officer your father filed the complaint against. For what? Rhodes closed his eyes. Taking bribes, he said, from defense contractors to mandate equipment purchases that weren't necessary. Your father had evidence, emails, payment records, testimony from contractors who had been strong-armed into the scheme, $400 million in contracts, $4 million in kickbacks to Stahl personally. And you buried it, Maya said. I buried it to keep your father alive, Rhodes said. Stahl has friends, people who could make Thomas disappear and call it a training accident. People who could make you disappear too if they thought you were a threat. He opened his eyes and looked at her. That letter you just read? That's a death sentence if Stahl finds out about it. He can't afford to have Thomas's evidence surface. He'll do whatever it takes to stop you. Good, Maya said. She folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. I want him to know. I want him to come after me. Because when he does, I'm going to finish what my father started. You'll get yourself killed, Rhodes said. Maybe, Maya said. But at least I'll die standing up for something. Can you say the same? Before Rhodes could answer, his phone rang. He pulled it from his pocket, looked at the screen, and went very still. I have to take this, he said. He walked away from the group, phone to his ear. Maya could not hear what he was saying, but she could see his posture getting stiffer with each passing second. When he came back, his face was grim. You need to leave, he said to Maya, right now. We had a deal. The deal is off. That was General Stahl. He's issued a direct order. If you're not off this base in 10 minutes, military police will arrest you for trespassing on federal property. Maya felt something cold settle in her chest. He knows I'm here. He's known since you drove through the gate, Rhodes had said. He has people everywhere. I was stupid to think we could do this quietly. Maya looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached into her wallet and pulled out a photograph. Old, creased. The colors faded. It showed 3 men in army uniforms, standing in front of a shooting range. The man on the left was young, maybe 25, with dark hair and a serious expression. The man in the middle was older, graying at the temples, with the kind of face that looked like it had never smiled. The man on the right was Thomas Brennan, younger than Maya had ever seen him, grinning like he had just won something. She handed the photograph to Rhodes. That's you on the left, she said. 2014. My father kept this photo in a box marked evidence. He never told me who the man in the middle was, but I'm guessing that's Stahl. Rhodes stared at the photograph. His hand was shaking slightly. Where did you get this? From the box. The same box that has the evidence my father collected. The evidence you thought disappeared. Maya smiled, but there was no warmth in it. It didn't disappear, Colonel. My father gave you a copy. He kept the originals. And when he died, he left them all to me. Rhodes looked up from the photograph. His eyes were wide. You have it, all of it? Every email, every payment record, every testimony, everything Stahl thought was buried. She paused. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Before Rhodes could answer, the sound of approaching vehicles cut through the morning air. Two MP Jeeps were coming down the access road, lights flashing. They stopped at the edge of the range. Four military police officers got out. The senior MP, a staff sergeant, approached Rhodes and saluted. Sir, we have orders from General Stahl. Miss Maya Brennan is to vacate the premises immediately or be placed under arrest for trespassing. Rhodes looked at the MPs, then at Maya, then back at the MPs. Maya watched his face, watched him calculate the same equation he had calculated 9 years ago. Career versus conscience. Safety versus honor. Staff Sergeant, Rhodes said slowly. Sir, tell General Stahl that Miss Brennan is my guest. She's here under my authority as range commander. If he wants her removed, he can come do it himself. The MP blinked. Sir, those are direct orders from a 3-star general. I'm aware, Rhodes said, but this is my range, and she's my guest. If General Stahl has a problem with that, he can take it up with me through proper channels. The MPs looked at each other. This was not a scenario they had trained for. Sir, the staff sergeant said carefully, are you refusing to comply with a direct order? I'm exercising my command authority, Rhodes said. There's a difference. The staff sergeant's radio crackled. He stepped away to answer it. The conversation was brief and too quiet to hear, but when he came back, his face was troubled. Sir, he said, General Stahl is requesting video confirmation that you understand the order and are refusing to comply. Tell him I'll do better than that, Rhodes said. He pulled out his own phone and dialed a number. When someone answered, he put it on speaker. General Stahl, Rhodes said, this is Colonel Jack Rhodes. I'm calling to inform you that I'm granting range access to Maya Brennan under my authority as Fort Carson Range Commander. If you have objections, file them through the appropriate chain of command. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then a voice, smooth and cold as ice water. Jack, the voice said, you're making a mistake. Probably, Rhodes said. I've made them before. This one will cost you your career. Maybe, Rhodes said, but at least I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror. Another pause, longer this time. You don't know what you're protecting, Stahl said. That woman is dangerous. No, Marcus, Rhodes said. You are, and I'm done pretending otherwise. He hung up. The MP stood frozen. Maya looked at Rhodes with an expression he could not quite read. You just ended your career, she said quietly. Probably, Rhodes agreed. But your father was right. Being right isn't enough. You have to be brave enough to stand by it. He turned to Keller. Lieutenant, get back on the scope. Miss Brennan isn't done shooting yet. Keller moved to the spotting scope. The other soldiers, who had been watching the entire exchange with the fascinated horror of people witnessing a superior officer commit career suicide, slowly returned to their positions. Maya stood very still for a moment. Then she nodded once. 1,000 meters, she said. If I make this shot, you read my father's letter to your men. All of it. And then you help me finish what he started. And if you miss, Rhodes asked. I won't, Maya said. She walked to the firing line. Behind her, the MPs got back in their jeeps and drove away, radios crackling with conversations she could not hear. On the other end of those radios, 300 miles away in a Pentagon office, Lieutenant General Marcus Stahl sat at his desk and stared at his phone. Then he made a call of his own. It's me, he said when someone answered. We have a problem. Brennan's daughter is at Fort Carson. Rhodes is protecting her, and she claims to have the evidence. The voice on the other end asked a question. I don't know if she's bluffing, Stahl said, but I can't afford to find out. Send Keller a message. Tell him it's time to earn that West Point recommendation for his daughter. He hung up. The machinery of destruction had begun to turn. The 1,000-meter target went up at precisely 1,000 hours. It took 4 men to carry the steel plate to the far end of the range, a square of hardened metal 2 feet on each side, thick enough to stop a .50 caliber round without penetrating. They bolted it to a post that had been sunk 3 feet into the rocky soil, then walked back the entire distance on foot because nobody wanted to be anywhere near that target when Maya Brennan started shooting. The morning had turned hot, the kind of high desert heat that came on fast once the sun climbed past a certain angle, baking the scrubland until the air itself seemed to shimmer and dance. At 1,000 meters, the target was visible only as a dark suggestion against the brown hillside, a geometric shape that could have been anything if you did not know what you were looking for. Maya stood at the firing line and watched the heat waves distort the distance. Beside her, Keller had set up the spotting scope, a high-end optic worth more than the truck Maya had driven here in. He adjusted the focus with the careful precision of someone who had spent years behind glass. reading wind and mirage and all the invisible things that lived in the space between bullet and target. Rhodes was there too, standing off to one side with his arms crossed, his face showing nothing. He had just committed what amounted to career suicide by defying a three-star general's direct order. The MPs had driven away 15 minutes ago, but everyone on the range knew that their departure was temporary. Stahl would be making calls right now, pulling strings, preparing countermoves. The question was how long they had before those countermoves arrived. Hollis had not moved from his position near the equipment shed. He stood with his back against the corrugated metal wall, watching Maya with an expression that had traveled a long distance from where it had been 2 hours ago. The smug certainty was gone. What had replaced it was harder to name. Not quite respect, not quite fear. Something in between. The look of a man who has just discovered that everything he thought he knew might be built on sand. Santos was at the wind flags, checking them with the kind of attention most people reserve for holy texts. She had pulled out a notebook and was writing down numbers, though what those numbers meant, only she knew. But Maya had noticed something about Santos, the way the corporal had reacted to Thomas Brennan's name, a flicker of recognition that went beyond professional interest, like she had heard that name before in a context that mattered. Wind is 8 to 10 miles per hour, Keller said from behind the spotting scope. Variable, gusting to 12, coming from the northwest mostly, but it's shifting. Mirage is moderate, boiling left to right. Maya said nothing. She was watching the grass at the 500-meter line, the way it bent and straightened, like breathing. Then she looked at the grass at 700 meters, then at 900. Reading the wind not as a single thing, but as a series of distinct conditions that change with terrain and distance and the invisible architecture of the air itself. Target is steel, Keller continued, 2 foot square. At this range, with that rifle and those sights, you're looking at maybe a 3-minute of angle hold. Wind drift at 10 miles per hour would be approximately 18 inches right. But with gusts, I know, Maya said quietly. She reached into the leather pouch at her hip and withdrew a cartridge. The brass gleamed dully in the sun. The lead bullet at its tip was slightly asymmetrical, bearing the small imperfections that came from being cast by hand rather than stamped by machine. She loaded it into the sharps. The breech closed with a solid metallic click that seemed louder than it should have been in the morning stillness. Then she did something that made every sniper on the range stop what they were doing and stare. She sat down, not prone, not kneeling, just sitting, cross-legged on the hard-packed earth, the rifle pulled tight to her shoulder, elbows braced against her knees. It was a position that belonged in a different century, on a different kind of battlefield, where men had time to settle and aim and make shots that mattered. That's not a stable position, Hollis said to nobody in particular. His voice carried across the range in the quiet. It's stable enough, Keller said. He had not looked away from the spotting scope. If you know what you're doing. Maya closed her eyes. For 10 seconds, she sat completely still, the rifle across her lap, face turned slightly upward like she was listening to something only she could hear. When she opened her eyes again, something in her expression had changed. The tension had drained away, replaced by a kind of calm that looked almost like indifference. She raised the rifle, found her sight picture. The front blade of the Sharp's iron sights was thick, designed for speed rather than precision, and at 1,000 meters, it covered the entire target and a good portion of the hillside around it. She would be aiming at a memory of where the target was rather than at the target itself, making corrections for wind and drop that existed only in her mind. 30 seconds passed. She did not move, did not breathe in any way that was visible from where Rhodes stood, just held, completely motionless, while the wind gusted and settled and gusted again. Then in the brief moment of calm between gusts, she fired. The Sharps bellowed. Black powder smoke erupted from the muzzle in a white cloud that hung in the air for a full second before dissipating. The rifle's recoil rocked Maya back slightly, but she rode it with her whole body, already settling back into position before the bullet had finished its flight. At 1,000 meters, even at 2,300 feet per second, the time of flight for a 45-70 round was just over 2 seconds. Long enough for doubt to creep in, long enough to second-guess everything. 2.3 seconds after Maya fired, the distant clang of metal on metal echoed back across the valley. Keller's voice came quiet and precise from behind the spotting scope. Hit, center mass, maybe 3 inches right of center. Nobody said anything for a long moment. Then Private Chen, who had been watching from near the ammo storage, let out a breath he had apparently been holding since Maya pulled the trigger. "Holy shit," he said softly. Maya lowered the rifle. She did not smile, did not celebrate, just began the reloading process with the same methodical care she had shown for every shot. Powder horn, measure, pour, ball from the pouch, ramrod down the barrel, 3 strokes, always 3. "Again," she said. She fired 4 more times. Each shot preceded by that same long stillness, that same patience that looked like meditation. Each shot followed by the distant clang of confirmation. When she was finished, Keller looked up from the scope. "5 for 5, he said. His voice was carefully neutral, but his hands were not quite steady as he adjusted the focus knob. "Best group I've ever seen at this range with any weapon. And you're doing it with a rifle that was obsolete before my grandfather was born." Maya stood and brushed dust from her pants. She turned to Rhodes. "I made the shot," she said. 5 times. We had a deal." Rhodes nodded slowly. He looked like a man standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that the next step would send him over, but unable to see any other path forward. "Gather everyone," he said to Keller. "Everyone on this range. I want them here in 2 minutes." Keller moved. Within 90 seconds, all 6 soldiers assigned to the range that morning were standing in a loose formation near the firing line. Hollis, Santos, Keller, Chen. 2 others whose names Maya had not learned, both young, both wearing the kind of wide-eyed expression that suggested they understood they were witnessing something significant, but could not quite grasp what. Rhodes stood before them. He held the letter in his hand, the one Maya had read earlier, the one written in Thomas Brennan's careful block letters. "What you're about to hear," Rhodes said, "is classified in the sense that it concerns events that were buried 9 years ago. Events that certain people in positions of power would prefer stayed buried. I'm reading this to you anyway, because those people were wrong then and they're wrong now. And because this woman," he gestured to Maya, "has earned the right to have her father's words heard." He began to read. The letter was not long, but Rhodes read it slowly, giving weight to each word. When he reached the part about Stahl, when he read the name aloud for the second time that morning, Maya watched the faces of the soldiers, watched comprehension dawn, watched anger follow close behind. When Rhodes finished, he folded the letter and looked at his men. "Chief Warrant Officer Thomas Brennan tried to expose corruption at the highest levels of Army command," Rhodes said. "He collected evidence of bribery, of kickbacks, of a scheme to mandate unnecessary equipment purchases that enriched defense contractors and the officers they had bought. He brought that evidence to me, and I buried it, because I was afraid, because I chose my career over the truth, because I told myself that keeping him out of prison was mercy, when what it really was cowardice." The range was silent, except for the wind moving through the scrub brush. "I can't undo that choice," Rhodes continued, "but I can make a different choice now. Starting today, this range operates on different principles. No optics until you can hit 500 meters with iron sights. No technology until you understand the fundamentals well enough that the technology serves you instead of replacing you. And no more silence about what happened to Thomas Brennan." He turned to Maya. "I'll help you finish what your father started," he said. "Whatever that takes, however long it takes, even if it costs me everything." Maya held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded once. "It will," she said quietly, "cost you everything. You know that, right?" "I know," Rhodes said. From the parking area, a vehicle approached. Not an MP Jeep this time. A civilian sedan, dark blue, anonymous. It pulled to a stop near the equipment shed and a woman got out. She was 26 years old and looked younger. Compact build, maybe 5'4", with black hair pulled back in a regulation bun and eyes that missed nothing. She wore ACS without any unit patch, just name tape and rank. Santos, Corporal. Except that Santos had been here all morning, had been standing right there by the wind flags, watching Maya shoot, which meant this woman was not who her uniform suggested she was. The woman walked directly to Rhodes. She did not salute, which was the first indication that regular protocols did not apply here. She simply stopped in front of him and spoke in a voice pitched low enough that Maya had to move closer to hear. "Colonel Rhodes, I'm Special Agent Diana Reeves, Defense Criminal Investigative Service. I've been investigating you for 4 months on suspicion of procurement fraud." Rhodes stared at her. Then he looked at the other Santos, the one who had been on the range all morning. That Santos had gone very still, her hand drifting toward her sidearm. "Who the hell are you?" Rhodes asked the woman by the wind flags. Actually, sir, I'm Corporal Mira Santos, the woman by the flag said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out credentials. Pentagon Inspector General's office, investigator. She nodded at the woman from the sedan. Someone pretending to be DCIS, which means we have a bigger problem than I thought. The woman from the sedan smiled. It was not a friendly expression. My credentials are legitimate, Colonel. What's not legitimate is the evidence you are about to hand over to Senator Morrison's office. Evidence that will implicate not just General Stahl, but dozens of other officers. Evidence that will destabilize procurement processes across the entire Department of Defense. She turned to Maya. As for you, Miss Brennan, you're in violation of federal trespassing laws. But more than that, you're in possession of classified materials that were illegally obtained. If you're smart, you'll destroy those materials and walk away. If you're very smart, you'll forget everything your father told you and go back to Wyoming. Maya took a step forward. The woman did not flinch, but something in her posture shifted. Ready. Who do you work for? Maya asked. People who understand that sometimes the truth is less important than stability. Your father didn't understand that. It cost him his career. Don't let it cost you more. The truth about Stahl. There is no truth about Stahl, the woman said. There are allegations made by a disgruntled warrant officer who couldn't adapt to modernization. Allegations that were investigated and dismissed. Anything else is conspiracy theory, and conspiracy theorists don't tend to do well when they're facing federal charges. The real Santos, the IG investigator, had moved closer during this exchange. Her hand was near her sidearm now, not quite touching it, but close enough to send a message. I don't know who you are, Santos said to the imposter, but impersonating a federal investigator is a felony. You're under arrest. The woman laughed. It was a genuine sound, almost cheerful. You think your authority means anything here? I could have you reassigned to counting boots in Alaska by the end of the day. One phone call, that's all it would take. Then make it, Santos said. I'd love to hear what General Stahl says when he realizes you just admitted to working for him in front of 7 witnesses. The woman's smile faded. For just a moment, something dangerous flickered behind her eyes. You're playing a game you don't understand, she said. All of you. This isn't about some old man's vendetta. This is about billions of dollars in contracts, thousands of trials, national security implications you can't even begin to comprehend. You think you can take down Stahl with a 40-year-old letter and some grainy photographs? He's been preparing for this for 9 years. He has lawyers, connections, friends in Congress. What do you have? The truth, Rhodes said quietly. The truth is what people believe it is, the woman said. And people believe what the newspapers tell them, what the official reports say, what the investigations conclude. You have no newspaper, no official report, no investigation. You have accusations from a dead man who was discharged for insubordination. Good luck making that stick. She turned and walked back to her car. Before getting in, she looked back at Maya. Your father was a good man, she said. Stubborn, principled. Those are admirable qualities. They're also why he died angry and alone while the people he tried to expose got promoted and decorated. Learn from his mistakes, Miss Brennan. Sometimes you can't win. Sometimes the best you can do is survive. She got in the car and drove away. The group stood in silence for a long moment. Then Hollis spoke, his voice rough. What the hell was that? A warning, Rhodes said. He pulled out his phone and checked the time. And she's right about one thing. MPs will be here soon. We have maybe 10 minutes. To do what? Keller asked. To decide, Rhodes said. He looked at each of them in turn. I'm about to be arrested, court-martialed probably. Dishonorably discharged at minimum. Anyone who stands with me is going to face the same. So I'm giving you all an out. Right now, walk away. Say you were just following orders. Say you didn't know what was happening. Nobody will blame you. Nobody moved. I'm serious, Rhodes said. This is your career, your future. Don't throw it away for what? Hollis cut in. His voice was sharp. For exposing corruption? For standing up to a general who's been taking bribes? For honoring the memory of a man who tried to do the right thing and got destroyed for it? He stepped forward. My father died in Kandahar because his spotter made a bad wind call. I blamed the spotter for years, hated him. But today I learned that my father died because the Army trained that spotter to rely on technology instead of skill, to trust a computer readout instead of his own eyes. And the reason the Army did that was because people like Stahl made money every time we bought a new scope or a new wind sensor, or a new piece of equipment that promised to make shooting easier. Hollis's hands were shaking now, clenched into fists at his sides. "My father didn't die in combat," he said. "He died so some general could get rich. And Thomas Brennan tried to stop it, tried to save lives like my father's, and we buried him for it." He looked at Rhodes. "I'm not walking away, sir, not from this, not ever." Santos spoke next, and when she did, Maya understood why the corporal had reacted to Thomas Brennan's name. "My father was Sergeant Miguel Santos," she said quietly. "He was Thomas Brennan's spotter in 2014. He died in 2017. Cancer. But before he died, he told me about Thomas, about how Thomas tried to change the system, about how the system destroyed him for it." She looked at Maya. "My father said Thomas Brennan saved his life twice. Once in combat, once by teaching him to trust his eyes instead of his instruments. I owe your father. We all do." Keller was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was steady, but there was something underneath it, something that sounded like shame. "I need to tell you all something," he said, "something I should have told you an hour ago." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, opened it to show a text message. The timestamp was from 3 days ago. The message read, "Your daughter's West Point application is under review. Would be a shame if something derailed it. Keep your eyes open at Fort Carson. Report anything unusual, especially anything involving Thomas Brennan's family. Respond to confirm." Keller had responded, "Understood. I've been reporting to Stahl for 6 months," Keller said quietly. "He has my daughter's future in his hands. One word from him and she doesn't get into the academy. Everything she's worked for, gone. So when he asked me to watch for anything unusual, I said yes. And when Maya showed up this morning, I sent him a message. That's how he knew she was here so fast." The silence that followed was heavy enough to feel. "I'm sorry," Keller said. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just telling you so you know what we're up against. Stahl doesn't just have power, he has leverage. He finds what you care about and he uses it. And he's been doing it for so long that he's built a whole network of people like me. People who are trapped. People who do what he says because the alternative is losing everything." He looked at Maya. "Your father wasn't just fighting one corrupt general. He was fighting a system, a machine designed to protect itself. That's why he lost. Not because he was wrong, because the machine is bigger than any one person." Maya had been quiet through all of this, listening, watching, her face showing nothing. Now she spoke. "My father used to tell me a story," she said, "about the first rifle he ever owned. A piece of junk he bought at a pawn shop for $40 when he was 16. The action was rough, the barrel was fouled, the stock was cracked. Everyone told him to throw it away, buy something new, but he didn't. He took it apart piece by piece, cleaned every component, rebedded the action, straightened the stock, and reinforced it with epoxy and steel pins. Spent 6 months on it. When he was done, that $40 pawn shop rifle could shoot groups at 300 yards that would make a custom build jealous." She looked at each of them in turn. "He told me that story to teach me that broken things can be fixed, that systems that seem impossible to change can be changed if you're willing to do the work, piece by piece, component by component, until what was broken becomes functional again." She reached into her jacket and pulled out a USB drive. Small, cheap, the kind you could buy at any office supply store. "This is everything my father collected on Stahl. Emails, bank records, testimony from defense contractors, payment schedules, meeting notes. 9 years of evidence that Stahl thought was buried. I've had it for 6 years, since the day my father died. I've been waiting for the right moment to use it." She held it up. "This is the moment," she said. "Not because the conditions are perfect, because they never will be, but because right now we have something Stahl doesn't expect. We have people who are willing to stand up, and that's all my father ever wanted. Not victory, just people who would stand." Rhodes took the USB drive from her hand. He looked at it like it was a live grenade. "If we use this," he said, "there's no going back. Stahl will come after all of us. Our careers are over, maybe more than our careers." "I know," Maya said. "We could all end up in prison, disgraced, destroyed." "I know." Rhodes looked at the USB drive for a long moment. Then he put it in his pocket. "Then let's make it count," he said. The sound of approaching vehicles cut through the morning air. 3 MP Jeeps this time, coming fast down the access road, lights flashing red and blue against the pale sky. "They're early," Santos said. "Stahl must have pushed them," Rhodes said. He turned to his team. Last chance. Anyone who wants to walk away, do it now. I won't hold it against you. Nobody moved. The Jeep skidded to a stop in a spray of gravel. 8 MPs got out, all of them armed, all of them looking like they wished they were anywhere else. The senior officer was a captain this time. Young, maybe 30, with the kind of face that suggested he had not yet learned to hide his emotions behind military bearing. He approached Rhodes and saluted stiffly. Colonel Rhodes, I have orders to place you under arrest for insubordination and conduct unbecoming an officer. You'll need to come with us, now. Rhodes returned the salute. On whose authority, Captain? Lieutenant General Marcus Stahl, sir. The orders came down through JAG 30 minutes ago. And Miss Brennan? The captain glanced at Maya. Federal trespassing charges, sir. She'll be processed separately. Rhodes nodded slowly. Then he did something that made every MP tense up. He reached into his pocket, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out the USB drive. Captain, Rhodes said, before you arrest me, I need you to take possession of evidence. Evidence of criminal activity by the officer who issued these arrest orders. The captain stared at the USB drive like it was a snake. Sir, I can't. You can and you will, Rhodes said. Under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, you have an obligation to report evidence of criminal activity by any service member, regardless of rank. What's on this drive constitutes such evidence. I'm formally reporting it to you now in front of 7 witnesses. Your refusal to accept it would itself be a violation of the UCMJ. The captain looked at his MPs. None of them were moving. This was way above their pay grade and everyone knew it. Sir, the captain said carefully, if you're accusing a general officer of criminal activity, that needs to go through the proper channels, not handed to an MP captain in a parking lot. The proper channels are compromised, Rhodes said. General Stahl has people everywhere. In JAG, in the IG's office, maybe even in the MP's. The only way this sees the light of day is if it goes public. And the only way it goes public is if someone with integrity takes it seriously enough to look. He held out the drive. Are you that someone, Captain? The young officer stood frozen. His career was balanced on a knife edge and he knew it. Take the drive, and he was declaring war on a 3-star general. Refuse it, and he was potentially bearing evidence of a crime. The silence stretched. Then one of the MPs stepped forward. A staff sergeant, older than the captain, with gray in his hair and 3 combat deployment patches on his sleeve. Sir, the staff sergeant said to the captain, permission to speak. Granted. I know Thomas Brennan's name, sir. I was at the AMU in 2014. He taught a course I attended. Best instructor I ever had. Taught me things about wind reading that kept me alive in Helmand Province. I heard what happened to him in 2015. Never believed the official story. Too many holes in it. Too convenient. The staff sergeant looked at the USB drive in Rhodes's hand. If there's evidence on that drive that explains what really happened, I want to see it. Not because I'm bucking the chain of command. Because I owe that man. We all do. Every sniper who came through AMU between 2004 and 2015 learned from him. He saved lives. If he got railroaded for trying to expose corruption, that's something I need to know. The captain looked at his staff sergeant for a long moment. Then he looked at Rhodes, then at Maya, then at the USB drive. This is above my pay grade, he said finally. Way above. But Staff Sergeant Chen is right. If there's evidence of a crime, I can't ignore it just because it's inconvenient. He took the USB drive. I'm still placing you under arrest, Colonel. I have orders and I have to follow them. But this, he held up the drive, goes into evidence, official evidence, on the record. And I'm filing a report about it with my chain of command within the hour. That's all I'm asking, Rhodes said. The captain gestured to his MPs. They moved forward with zip ties in the kind of careful professionalism that suggested they really did not want to be doing this. As they secured Rhodes's hands behind his back, the colonel looked at Maya. The notebook, he said. Your father's notebook. It's in my office, top drawer of my desk. There's a key in my left boot. I'll get it, Maya said. And Maya, Rhodes said as the MPs began walking him toward the jeeps. Don't stop. No matter what happens to me, no matter what they threaten, don't stop until it's done. I won't, Maya said. They put Rhodes in the back of the first jeep. As it drove away, the captain turned to Maya. Miss Brennan, you're under arrest for federal trespassing. You have the right to remain silent. I know my rights, Maya said, and I'm not going anywhere until I get what I came for. Ma'am, I can't. You can arrest me. You can process me. You can lock me up. But in about 30 minutes, a reporter from the Military Times is going to receive an anonymous email with a copy of everything on that USB drive, along with a full statement from me explaining what happened here today. How a colonel was arrested for trying to expose corruption, how a three-star general used his power to silence whistleblowers, how the Army buried a good man to protect a criminal. The captain went pale. "You're bluffing. Try me," Maya said. She pulled out her phone. "I have the reporter's email address pulled up right now. All I have to do is hit send. The email is already written, already attached. The only thing stopping me is a timer I set for 30 minutes. If I don't cancel that timer, the email sends automatically." She showed him the screen. The captain could see the timer counting down. 29 minutes, 42 seconds. "You wouldn't," he said. "My father spent 8 years teaching me to make impossible shots," Maya said. "You think I'm not willing to make an impossible move?" The captain stared at her, then at his MPs, then at the phone in her hand. "What do you want?" "Time," Maya said. 24 hours. Don't process the arrest. Don't file the paperwork. Give me 24 hours to do what needs to be done. After that, I'll turn myself in, voluntarily. No resistance. "I can't do that. I have orders." "Orders from a man who's about to be exposed as a criminal," Maya said. "In 24 hours, those orders won't mean anything. General Stahl will be under investigation, maybe under arrest. Your career will be fine as long as you can say you made the right call when it mattered." The captain looked at the timer on her phone. 28 minutes now. "If I do this," he said slowly, "and you're lying, my career is over." "If you don't do this," Maya said, "and I'm telling the truth, you'll spend the rest of your life knowing you helped bury evidence of corruption because you were too afraid to make the right call." The captain closed his eyes. When he opened them, he looked 10 years older. 24 hours, he said. "After that, you turn yourself in. And I'm filing a report that says I released you pending further investigation due to questions about the validity of the charges. That's the best I can do." "That's all I need," Maya said. She canceled the timer. The captain and his MPs got back in their jeeps and drove away. When they were gone, the range fell silent again. Santos was the first to speak. "Did you really have that email ready to send?" "No," Maya said. "I was bluffing." "Jesus Christ," Hollis said. He sounded like he was caught between admiration and horror. "You just bluffed an MP captain into letting you go." "I learned from the best," Maya said. She looked at Keller. "Your daughter, what's her name?" "Sarah," Keller said. "Sarah Keller. She's 17, top of her class, wants to serve like her father did, like her grandfather did before that. Stahl threatened her to control you." "Yes." "Then we take away his leverage," Maya said. "We get her into West Point without his help. We document everything he did to blackmail you. And we make sure that when this is over, his threats can't touch her." "How?" Keller asked. Maya pulled out her phone and made a call. It rang twice before someone answered. "Senator Morrison's office," a woman's voice said. "This is Maya Brennan calling. I need to speak with the senator. It's urgent. It's about military corruption and it can't wait." There was a pause. "The senator is in session. Can I take a message?" "Tell her it's about General Marcus Stahl and the $40 million in bribes her office has been investigating for the past 2 years. Tell her I have evidence, physical evidence, names, dates, amounts, everything she needs to make her case." Another pause, longer this time. "Please hold." The hold music lasted maybe 15 seconds before it cut off, and a different voice came on the line. Older, female, sharp. "This is Senator Morrison. Who am I speaking with?" "Maya Brennan, ma'am. My father was Chief Warrant Officer Thomas Brennan. He collected evidence of corruption by Lieutenant General Marcus Stahl in 2015. Evidence that was buried. I have that evidence now, and I'm ready to turn it over to your office." "Miss Brennan, if this is some kind of—" "It's not. I have emails showing payment schedules from Vickers Defense Systems to offshore accounts controlled by Stahl. I have testimony from contractors who were coerced into participating in the scheme. I have meeting notes detailing how the system worked. My father spent a year collecting this information before they forced him out. It's been sitting in a box for 9 years waiting for the right person to use it." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "If what you're saying is true," Senator Morrison said carefully, "this is the kind of evidence that brings down careers, plural, and not just Stahl's, everyone who helped cover this up, everyone who knew and said nothing. This will be ugly." "I know," Maya said. "People will fight back. Hard. They'll come after you. After anyone who helps you. Are you prepared for that?" "Yes, ma'am." "And you're willing to testify?" Under oath? Knowing that Stahl's lawyers will tear into you? That they'll investigate every aspect of your life, looking for something to discredit you? I am. Another pause. Maya could hear papers rustling in the background. I'm in Washington, Senator Morrison said, but I can have my chief of staff meet you in Colorado Springs in 6 hours. Bring everything. We'll go through it together. If it's as good as you say it is, we'll have enough to open a formal Senate investigation. And once that happens, Stahl won't be able to bury it. Not this time. Thank you, Senator. Don't thank me yet, Morrison said. You're about to start a war. Make sure you're ready for it. The call ended. Maya looked at the group standing around her. Hollis, Santos, Keller, Chen, two others whose names she still did not know, but who had stood their ground when it mattered. We have 6 hours, she said. Keller, I need you to write down everything Stahl did to blackmail you. Every message, every threat, every time he used your daughter to control you. Make it detailed. Make it specific. Okay. Santos, you said you have contacts in the IG's office. Use them. Find out who ordered you to investigate Rhodes. Find out who pointed you at him instead of Stahl. Follow the chain back as far as you can. On it. Hollis, I need you to do something harder. I need you to find the spotter who made the wind call that killed your father. Find him and ask him what happened. Ask him if anyone pressured him to rely on technology instead of his training. Ask him if he was following procedures that came down from the top. Hollis's face went hard, and if he was, then his testimony becomes part of the evidence. Not because we're blaming him, because we're showing the pattern, showing that Stahl's corruption didn't just steal money, it cost lives. Hollis nodded slowly. I'll find him. Maya turned to Chen and the others. The rest of you, spread out. Talk to everyone on this base who trained under my father. Everyone who remembers him. Everyone who thought the official story about his discharge didn't add up. Get their statements. Get them on record. Build a picture of who he was and what he tried to do. They scattered. Within minutes, the range was empty except for Maya. She stood in the morning sun and looked out at the 1,000-meter target, still hanging on its post at the far end of the valley. 5 hits, center mass, proof that the old ways still worked. That skill mattered more than technology, that her father had been right about everything. But being right had not been enough to save him, and it might not be enough to save her either. She walked to Rhodes's office, found the key in his boot, exactly where he said it would be. Opened the desk drawer and pulled out her father's notebook. The cover was worn smooth by years of handling. The pages inside were filled with her father's careful handwriting. Equations, diagrams, observations about wind and mirage, and the 1,000 invisible things that affected a bullet's flight. On the last page, written in slightly larger script than the rest, was a message. Maya, if you're reading this, you've gone further than I could. You've done what I couldn't. I'm proud of you. Not because you're a good shot, because you're brave enough to stand when standing costs something. That's the only thing that matters. Not the shooting, the standing. Finish it. For both of us. Dad. Maya closed the notebook. Her hands were shaking slightly. She had not cried when her father died. Had not cried at the funeral. Had not cried during the long nights when she lay awake wondering if any of this was worth it. She did not cry now either. But her eyes were wet when she walked out of the office and back into the Colorado sun. 300 miles away in a Pentagon office with a view of the Potomac, Lieutenant General Marcus Stahl hung up the phone and stared at the wall. The call had been from his lawyer. The news was bad. Senator Morrison had just announced a formal investigation into defense contracting irregularities. She had not mentioned Stahl by name. Not yet. But she had used language that made it clear where the investigation was headed. Words like systemic corruption and decades of misconduct and accountability at the highest levels. Stahl had been preparing for this moment for 9 years, had built firewalls, had cultivated allies, had destroyed everyone who threatened to expose him. But he had not counted on Maya Brennan, had not counted on her having the evidence, had not counted on her being willing to use it. He made another call. It's me, he said when someone answered. She has the drive. She's taking it to Morrison. We need to stop her before she gets there. How? The voice on the other end asked. Stahl looked out of the river, at the monuments in the distance, at the city that had been his home for 30 years. Whatever it takes, he said. He hung up and began making a list. The meeting with Senator Morrison's chief of staff was scheduled for 1800 hours at a coffee shop in Colorado Springs. Anonymous, public, the kind of place where 2 people could talk without drawing attention. Maya had 4 hours to get there, 4 hours to gather everything she needed, 4 hours before Stahl's next move. She spent the first hour driving back to the small motel where she had stayed the night before. The room was cheap, the kind of place that rented by the week to construction workers and long-haul truckers, with thin walls and thinner mattresses and a view of the parking lot. But it was paid in cash and required no identification, which made it perfect. Inside the room, taped to the underside of the bathroom sink, was a waterproof bag. Maya had hidden it there the night before, following the same protocols her father had taught her about keeping evidence secure. Never in one place. Never where someone would think to look first. Never without a backup. She pulled the bag free and opened it on the bed. Inside were copies of everything. The USB drive was the original. This was the insurance policy. Printed documents, photographs, scanned images of handwritten notes. Her father had been meticulous about documentation, about creating redundancy, about making sure that if one copy was destroyed, others would survive. Maya spread the documents across the bed and began organizing them. Chronological order, by type, by level of importance, creating a narrative that would be impossible to dismiss or ignore. There were emails between Stahl and James Vickers, CEO of Vickers Defense Systems, discussing payment schedules, discussing how to structure the bribes to avoid detection, discussing which senators to target, which procurement officers to pressure, which journalists to feed stories about the vital importance of modernization. There were bank records showing wire transfers from shell companies in the Cayman Islands to accounts in Stahl's name. Not large amounts, nothing that would trigger automatic reporting, but steady, regular, adding up over the years to just over $4 million. There were sworn statements from 3 different defense contractors who had been coerced into the scheme. Men who had been told that if they did not participate, their companies would be blacklisted, that their contracts would be terminated, that their reputations would be destroyed. And there were photographs. Stahl and Vickers at a golf resort in Scotland. Stahl and Vickers at a private dinner in McLean, Virginia. Stahl and Vickers shaking hands outside a congressional office building with expressions that suggested they had just closed a deal. Maya had seen all of this before, had memorized every detail. But seeing it laid out now, seeing the full scope of what her father had uncovered, she felt something shift inside her, not anger exactly. Anger had been there for 6 years, a constant companion that she had learned to carry like weight. This was something colder, harder, the kind of clarity that came when you stopped hoping for justice and started planning how to take it. Her phone buzzed, a text from Santos. Found something, call me. Maya dialed. Santos answered on the first ring. I traced the investigation order back, Santos said without preamble. The one that sent me after Rhodes. It came from Colonel Patricia Vance in the IG's office. But Vance didn't originate it. She was forwarding orders from higher up, from someone in the Deputy Chief of Staff's office. Who? That's the problem. The trail goes cold. Whoever ordered the investigation buried their tracks. But I found something else. Vance has a daughter, Captain Jennifer Vance, assigned to the Pentagon, works in the same office as Stahl. Maya felt the pieces clicking together. He got to Vance through her daughter. That's my read, Santos said. Same playbook he used on Keller. Find what someone cares about and use it as leverage. Vance probably didn't even know she was helping cover up corruption. She just knew that if she didn't follow orders, her daughter's career would suffer. Can we prove it? Not yet, but I'm working on it. I've got a friend in personnel who owes me a favor. He's pulling Captain Vance's assignment history. If there's anything unusual, anything that suggests she was placed in that office specifically to give Stahl leverage over her mother, we'll find it. Good. Send me everything you have in 2 hours. I need it before I meet with Morrison's people. Will do, Maya. Yeah? Be careful. Stahl knows you're coming. He's had 9 years to prepare for this. He won't go down easy. Neither did my father, Maya said. And he went down anyway. Sometimes you don't win by being careful. You win by being willing to lose everything. She hung up and went back to organizing the documents. 90 minutes later, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost did not answer. Then instinct made her pick up. Miss Brennan? The voice was male, older, with the kind of measured authority that came from decades of telling people what to do and having them do it. This is Lieutenant General Marcus Stahl. I think we should talk. Maya said nothing for a long moment. Then she walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot, checking for anything unusual. 2 cars she did not recognize. A van with darkened windows. Could be nothing. Could be surveillance. "How did you get this number?" she asked. "I have resources, Miss Brennan. Considerable resources. Which is why I'm calling. To see if we can resolve this situation before it becomes unpleasant for both of us." "Unpleasant for me, you mean?" "For both of us," Stahl repeated. "You're operating under some misconceptions about what happened in 2015, about what your father was really doing, about what I'm really guilty of." "You took bribes from defense contractors," Maya said flatly. $4 million over 7 years. In exchange, you mandated equipment purchases that enrich those contractors and put soldiers at risk. My father tried to expose you. You destroyed him for it." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Your father was a good man," Stahl said. "I won't deny that. He was also naive. He thought the world was simple, right and wrong, black and white. He didn't understand the complexities of defense acquisition, the political realities, the need to balance competing interests." "You mean the need to get rich while soldiers died?" "I mean the need to keep this country safe," Stahl said, and there was an edge to his voice now. "You think those contracts were about money? They were about making sure our military had the best equipment available, the most advanced scopes, the most reliable sensors, the technology that gives American soldiers an edge over every enemy they face. Technology that made them dependent, that eroded their fundamental skills. Skills are fine for the range, Miss Brennan, but in combat, soldiers need every advantage they can get. Your father's methods were romantic, nostalgic, but they got people killed." Maya's hand tightened on the phone. "My father's methods saved lives. He proved it. He had the data, the statistics. Soldiers trained his way had better combat performance, lower casualty rates, better outcomes in difficult conditions. He had anecdotes," Stahl said dismissively, "cherry-picked examples that fit his narrative. When the Army did actual controlled studies, they found no significant difference. And even if there had been, the cost of training soldiers to his standard was prohibitive. We're talking years of individual instruction. Resources we don't have. Time we can't afford. So you took the money and bought equipment that made training easier, that let you push soldiers through faster. That looked good on procurement reports while making them worse at their jobs. I made the Army more efficient," Stahl said. "I helped modernize an institution that was stuck in the past. And yes, I was compensated for that work. Not through bribes, through legitimate consulting fees paid after I retire, through speaking engagements, through board positions with companies that value my expertise. That's not what the bank records show." Another pause, longer this time. "You're bluffing," Siddall said. "You don't have any bank records. Your father never had them. If he did, he would have used them." "He tried to," Maya said. "You stopped him. You threatened him with prison. You threatened his family. So he took the discharge and kept the evidence safe. And when he died, he left it all to me." "I don't believe you." "Then ignore me," Maya said. "Don't try to stop me. Let me walk into Senator Morrison's office and hand over nothing. Let me embarrass myself. Why are you calling if you think I'm bluffing?" Silence on the other end. "What do you want?" Stahl asked finally. His voice had changed. The authority was still there, but underneath it was something else. Something that sounded almost like fear. "I want you to pay for what you did to my father. Your father made his own choices. He could have played along, could have kept his head down, could have retired with honor after 20 years and lived comfortably. Instead, he chose to be a martyr. That's not my fault." "You're right," Maya said. "It's not your fault that he chose to stand up. It's your fault that standing up cost him everything. What would you have me do? Confess? Resign? Turn myself in? That won't bring your father back. It won't undo what happened. It will just destroy everything I've built, everything I've worked for." "Good," Maya said. "You're willing to ruin dozens of careers, to damage the Army's procurement process, to hand political ammunition to people who want to gut defense spending? All for revenge?" "Not revenge," Maya said. "Justice. There's a difference." "There's really not," Stahl said. "Not when you're the one demanding it. Listen to me, Miss Brennan. I'm offering you a way out, a way to walk away from this with something. I can't bring your father back, but I can make sure his name is cleared. Officially, I can have the discharge reversed, change it to retirement with full honors. I can arrange for a posthumous commendation. I can make sure that when people remember Thomas Brennan, they remember him as a hero who served his country with distinction." Maya felt something cold settle in her chest. In exchange for what? The evidence. All of it. Every copy, every document, every photograph. You destroy it, all of it. And in return, your father gets the recognition he deserved. His legacy gets restored. Isn't that what you really want? Maya looked at the documents spread across the bed. Her father's work, his sacrifice, the evidence he had collected knowing it would cost him everything. No, she said quietly. No? My father didn't collect this evidence because he wanted recognition. He collected it because it was the right thing to do, because corruption needed to be exposed, because soldiers deserve better than to be pawns in your scheme. Clearing his name in exchange for bearing the truth would be the worst kind of betrayal. Then you're a fool, Stahl said. The friendliness was gone from his voice now. What was left was cold and hard. Just like your father was. You think Morrison will protect you? You think going public will keep you safe? I have friends in the FBI, in the Justice Department, in the media. I can make you disappear into an investigation that lasts years. I can destroy your credibility before you even open your mouth. I can make sure that when this is over, you're the one in prison and I'm the one still standing. Maybe, Maya said, but you'll be standing alone. Everyone will know what you did, even if you escape prosecution, even if your lawyers get you off. The evidence will be public. The truth will be out there, and you'll spend the rest of your life knowing that everyone who looks at you sees a criminal who bought his way out of justice. You're betting everything on a maybe, Stahl said. That's not smart. My father taught me that some bets are worth making even when the odds are bad. This is one of them. She hung up. Her hands were shaking. She had just declared war on one of the most powerful men in the Pentagon, a man with resources she could not match, connections she could not counter, the ability to destroy her with a phone call. But she had something he did not have. She had the truth, and she had people willing to stand with her. Her phone buzzed again. A text from Hollis. Found the spotter. He wants to talk. Can you meet us? Maya texted back. Where? The address came through a minute later. A VFW hall on the south side of Colorado Springs. She had 2 hours before the meeting with Morrison's chief of staff. Just enough time. She gathered the documents, packed them carefully into a waterproof bag, and headed out. The VFW hall was a low brick building with a gravel parking lot and an American flag hanging from a pole that had seen better decades. Inside, the walls were covered with photographs of men in uniform. Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, Iraq, Afghanistan. Generations of soldiers who had served and come home and tried to make sense of what they had seen. Hollis was waiting in the main room, standing next to a man who looked to be in his late 40s. The man was thin, thin with graying hair and eyes that held the particular kind of exhaustion that came from carrying weight for too long. Miss Brennan, Hollis said, this is Chief Warrant Officer David Chen. He was the spotter for my father in Kandahar, the one who made the wind call. Chen extended his hand. Maya shook it. His grip was firm, but there was a tremor in it that suggested old damage. I'm sorry about your father, Chen said. His voice was quiet, almost hoarse. Sergeant Hollis was a good man, one of the best I ever worked with. What happened to him shouldn't have happened. Derek told me about the wind call, Maya said. He said it was an error. It was, Chen said, but not the kind of error you're thinking. I read the wind. I gave the correct correction, but I gave it based on what the sensors were telling me. The digital wind meter, the ballistic computer, the instruments that were supposed to make my job easier. He paused and looked at the photographs on the wall. Your father tried to teach me different, Chen said. Back in 2014, I took one of his courses at the AMU. He spent 3 days trying to get me to stop trusting the instruments and start trusting my eyes, to read the grass, to watch the mirage, to feel the wind instead of measuring it. I didn't listen. I thought he was stuck in the past. I thought the technology was better. What happened in Kandahar? Maya asked. The sensors gave me a wind reading of 8 miles per hour from the west. I corrected for it. Sergeant Hollis took the shot, but the actual wind at target was 12 miles per hour from the northwest. The sensors were reading conditions at our position, not at the target. 700 meters away, the wind was completely different. By the time I realized it, the bullet had already missed, and the shooter we were trying to neutralize had already fired back. Chen's voice was shaking now. If I had read the wind the way your father taught me, I would have seen it. The grass was moving different at distance. The mirage was telling me the conditions weren't uniform. But I was looking at the instruments instead of the environment. And Sergeant Hollis died because I trusted technology more than I trusted my training. Hollis had been standing quietly during this. Now he spoke. It wasn't your fault, he said. Chen looked at him. I made the call that killed your father. How is that not my fault? Because you were following the procedures you were trained to follow, Hollis said. Because the Army taught you to rely on instruments instead of fundamentals. Because people like Stahl pushed equipment that made training faster but shooters worse. My father didn't die because you made a mistake. He died because the system failed him. Failed both of you. Chen closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. I've been carrying this for 11 years, he said. Every day, every night, wondering if there was something I could have done different. Something I should have seen. I left the Army in 2017. Couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't trust myself behind a rifle knowing what happened. You can help now, Maya said. You can testify about what happened, about how the equipment failed, about how Thomas Brennan tried to prevent exactly this kind of tragedy and was punished for it. Your testimony could save lives, could change how the Army trains snipers, could make sure no one else dies the way Sergeant Hollis died. Chen looked at her for a long moment. If I testify, I'm admitting my mistake publicly, my failure. Everyone will know. Everyone should know, Maya said. Not because you failed, because the system failed. And the only way to fix a broken system is to show how it breaks people. Chen nodded slowly. Okay, he said. Okay, I'll do it. For Sergeant Hollis, for your father, for everyone else this has hurt. Maya pulled out her phone and called Santos. I need you to document a witness statement, she said when Santos answered. Chief Warrant Officer David Chen, spotter, Kandahar 2015. He has testimony about how equipment failure contributed to a combat death. Get it on record. Get it notarized. We need it in 2 hours. I'm on it, Santos said. Maya hung up and looked at Chen. Thank you, she said. This matters, more than you know. She left the VFW hall and drove to the coffee shop where she was supposed to meet Senator Morrison's chief of staff. She arrived 20 minutes early and took a table in the back corner where she could see the door. Old habits. Her father had taught her to never sit with her back exposed. But as she sat there, something felt wrong. The hair on the back of her neck was standing up. The particular instinct that came from years of training to notice when things were not quite right. She scanned the coffee shop. 15 customers. Most of them looked normal. College students with laptops. A couple on what looked like a first date. An older man reading a newspaper. But there were 2 men near the counter who did not fit. Mid-30s, short haircuts. The kind of posture that came from military training. They were trying to look casual, but their eyes kept flicking to the door. To her. To the bag at her feet that held all the evidence. Maya's hand went to her phone. She pulled up Santos's number ready to call. But before she could dial, the door opened and a woman walked in. 50 years old, gray hair cut short, wearing a business suit and carrying a leather briefcase that looked expensive. She scanned the room, made eye contact with Maya, and walked over. Miss Brennan? Yes. I'm Rebecca Marsh, Senator Morrison's chief of staff. Thank you for meeting with me. They shook hands and Marsh sat down. She set the briefcase on the table but did not open it yet. Her eyes flicked briefly to the 2 men at the counter, then back to Maya. Before we begin, Marsh said quietly, I need to tell you something. Those 2 men by the counter are not customers. They've been here since I arrived 15 minutes ago. They're watching you, and I'm fairly certain they're armed. Maya had already noticed. But hearing Marsh confirm it made the situation real in a way it had not been before. Stahl sent them, Maya said. Almost certainly, which means we have a problem. If they move on you here, there's not much I can do. But if we can get the evidence out of your possession and into mine, it becomes much harder for them to justify any action. Marsh reached down and opened her briefcase. Inside were legal documents, file folders, a laptop. She pulled out a receipt book. I'm going to purchase the evidence from you, Marsh said, right now for $1. That makes this a legal transaction. The evidence becomes property of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Any attempt to take it from me is theft of government property. It's a thin protection, but it's something. She pulled out a dollar bill and set it on the table. Maya looked at the bill, then at Marsh, then at the 2 men by the counter who were no longer pretending not to watch. If I give you this evidence and they move on me anyway, what happens to it? It goes to Morrison, Marsh said. No matter what, I have instructions. If anything happens to me, if I don't check in within the hour, copies of everything get sent to 3 different journalists. to the Inspector General, to the House Armed Services Committee. Stahl can't stop all of them. Maya reached down and pulled the waterproof bag from under the table. She set it on the table between them. Everything's in there, she said. Documents, photographs, the USB drive, statements from witnesses. Everything my father collected plus everything we gathered today. Marsh took the bag. She opened it briefly, glanced inside, then closed it and put it in her briefcase. Received, she said formally. She pulled out a receipt and began writing. One bag of documents related to military procurement investigation. Purchased for $1 from Maya Brennan on... The two men at the counter stood up. They did not draw weapons, did not make any threatening moves, just stood and began walking toward the table. Casual, unhurried, but with the kind of purpose that made every instinct Maya had screamed danger. Marsh saw them too. Her hand went into her briefcase. When it came out, she was holding her phone, already recording video. Gentlemen, she said loudly enough for everyone in the coffee shop to hear, I'm Rebecca Marsh, Chief of Staff to Senator Morrison. I'm currently in possession of evidence related to a Senate investigation. If you interfere with me or my associate, you'll be charged with obstruction of a federal investigation. I'm recording this conversation. Please state your names and your business here. The two men stopped. One of them reached into his jacket. Every customer in the coffee shop was watching now. The college students had looked up from their laptops. The couple had stopped talking. The old man had lowered his newspaper. Easy, the first man said. His hand came out of his jacket, holding not a weapon but a badge. Federal agents, DCIS. We have questions about the materials you just received. From whom? Marsh asked. Her phone was still recording. From a person under investigation for theft of classified materials. Miss Brennan is not under investigation, and these materials are not classified. They're evidence collected by a private citizen and legally transferred to a Senate committee. You have no jurisdiction here. Ma'am, we're going to need you to hand over that briefcase. No, Marsh said simply. You're going to need to leave now before I call the actual DCIS and have you arrested for impersonating federal agents. The second man's hand moved toward his jacket, but before he could reach whatever was inside, the door opened again. 3 Colorado Springs police officers walked in. They had been called, Maya realized, by one of the college students who had recognized what was happening and made a quiet call. The lead officer approached the table. We got a call about a disturbance. Everything okay here? No, Marsh said. She pointed to the two men. These individuals are impersonating federal agents and attempting to interfere with a Senate investigation. I need them detained. Ma'am, we're going to need to see some identification. All of you. Marsh produced her Senate credentials. Maya showed her driver's license. The two men produced DCIS badges that looked legitimate but probably were not. The officer examined the badges, then spoke into his radio. There was a brief exchange. When he came back, his expression had changed. We're going to need you two to come with us, he said to the men. DCIS says they have no agents operating in Colorado Springs today, which means these badges are fake. The two men exchanged glances. For a moment, Maya thought they were going to run, or fight, or do something stupid that would end with people getting hurt. Instead, they simply turned and walked toward the door. The officers followed. As they reached the exit, one of the men looked back at Maya. This isn't over, he said quietly. Then they were gone. Marsh let out a breath she had been holding. She closed her briefcase, the evidence safely inside. We need to leave, she said. Now, before they come back with more people. They left through the back exit. Marsh had a car waiting, a black sedan with a driver who looked like he had done executive protection work. They got in and drove away fast. Where are we going? Maya asked. Airport, Marsh said. There's a charter flight leaving for Washington in 40 minutes. We'll be in Morrison's office by midnight. And by morning, this evidence will be in front of every member of the Armed Services Committee. She looked at Maya. You did it. You got the evidence out. Whatever happens now, Stahl can't bury it. Maya looked out the window at Colorado Springs passing by. She thought about her father, about the 6 years since his death, about the 11 years since his discharge, about all the time spent waiting for this moment. It's not done yet, she said. Stahl still has power, still has connections. He'll fight this. Let him fight, Marsh said. He's fighting in the open now, and that's a fight he can't win. 6 months later, the Senate Armed Services Committee released a report on corruption in military procurement. The investigation had uncovered systematic bribery involving multiple defense contractors and senior military officers. Lieutenant General Marcus Stahl was arrested and charged with 17 counts of fraud, bribery, and conspiracy. He pleaded guilty to avoid trial and was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. James Vickers, CEO of Vickers Defense Systems, was charged separately and received 8 years. 3 other generals were forced to retire under clouds of investigation. Dozens of contractors lost their security clearances. The imposter who had appeared at Fort Carson claiming to be a DCIS agent was arrested trying to board a flight to Dubai. She was identified as a former CIA contractor working as a private investigator for a firm that specialized in making problems disappear for wealthy clients. She turned state's evidence in exchange for a reduced sentence and provided testimony that implicated Stahl in additional crimes including witness intimidation and obstruction of justice. The report specifically mentioned Thomas Brennan by name, cited his investigation, acknowledged that his discharge had been unjust and politically motivated, recommended that his record be cleared and his rank restored posthumously. Colonel Jack Rhodes was not court-martialed. The charges against him were dropped after Senator Morrison's office intervened. He was promoted to brigadier general and placed in charge of reforming the Army's marksmanship training program. His first act was to mandate that all snipers complete 6 months of fundamentals training with iron sights before being issued optical systems. Lieutenant Evan Keller's daughter was admitted to West Point based on her own merit, not on anyone's recommendation. Keller testified at the Senate hearings and was commended for his cooperation. He remained in the Army and was assigned to the new training program as a senior instructor. Sergeant Derek Hollis completed the fundamentals course and qualified at 1,500 meters with iron sights. He requested and received a transfer to the marksmanship unit, where he began teaching the methods Thomas Brennan had developed. Chief Warrant Officer David Chen came out of retirement to testify at the hearings. His testimony about the Kandahar incident led to a comprehensive review of how technology was integrated into sniper training. New protocols were developed that emphasized fundamental skills as the foundation, with technology as supplemental rather than primary. Corporal Mira Santos was promoted to sergeant and reassigned to the Inspector General's office permanently, where she specialized in investigating procurement fraud. And Maya Brennan drove back to Wyoming. The ranch her father had left her was small, 60 acres of scrubland and pine forest in the shadow of the Bighorn Mountains. The house needed work. The barn needed more. But it was home. It was where her father had taught her to shoot, where he had spent his last years after the discharge, working with the land and the rifle and the wind that moved through the valley like a living thing. She spent 3 months fixing the place up, replacing rotted boards, patching the roof, clearing brush from the firing line her father had built behind the house. When it was done, she set up targets at 300 meters, 500, 800, 1,000, and she began to teach. Word spread quietly through the veteran community about a woman in Wyoming who could teach the old methods, who understood wind and distance and the fundamental skills that modern training had forgotten. Soldiers came, retired snipers looking to remember what they had once known, young shooters wanting to learn what was no longer taught. Maya trained them the way her father had trained her, patiently, methodically, starting with the basics and building from there. No shortcuts, no technology until they had proven they did not need it. She was not gentle and she was not encouraging, and she did not accept excuses. But she was effective. 6 months after the Senate report was released, she received a call from Rhodes. "We're renaming the primary range at Fort Carson," he said, "the Thomas Brennan Marksmanship Center. I'd like you to be there for the dedication ceremony." "I don't do ceremonies," Maya said. "I know, but your father earned this. He deserves to be remembered, not just by us, by everyone who comes through that range for the next 50 years. Maya was quiet for a moment. What would the ceremony involve? Speeches mostly. Some of the soldiers he trained will be there. Some of the people he saved. We'll unveil a plaque with his name and his service record, and we'd like you to say a few words, if you're willing. I'm not good with words. You don't have to be good, you just have to be there, to represent what he stood for, to show people that what he fought for mattered." Maya looked out the window of her ranch house at the valley beyond, at the targets downrange, at the wind moving through the grass in patterns she had learned to read like text. "Okay," she said. The ceremony was held on a clear September morning with the kind of light that made distances seem infinite. 200 people attended, soldiers in dress uniform, veterans in civilian clothes, reporters from Military Times and Stars and Stripes. Senator Morrison flew in from Washington to give remarks. The plaque was simple, bronze mounted on granite. It read, Thomas Brennan Marksmanship Center, dedicated to CWO, Thomas Brennan, who taught that precision is human, technology serves the human, and courage is standing for truth when truth costs everything. When it was Maya's turn to speak, she walked to the podium and looked out at the assembled crowd. She had prepared nothing, had not written anything down. She simply spoke from the center of what she knew to be true. My father was not a perfect man, she said. He was stubborn, difficult. He made enemies because he could not let things go that should have been let go. But he was right about the things that mattered. He was right that skill cannot be replaced by equipment. He was right that fundamental training saves lives. And he was right that sometimes you have to be willing to lose everything to do what's right. She paused. He lost his career, his reputation, his peace of mind, but he never lost his conviction. Never stopped believing that what he was doing mattered. And because he didn't stop, because he kept collecting evidence and teaching and fighting even when everyone told him he had already lost, we're standing here today. This range exists because he refused to quit. The reforms and training exist because he refused to quit. Justice exists because he refused to quit. She looked at the plaque. He taught me to shoot. But more than that, he taught me that the shot is not the point. The point is everything that comes before the shot. The patience, the preparation, the discipline, the willingness to wait for the right moment, even when waiting is the hardest thing in the world. He taught me that precision is about more than hitting targets. It's about hitting the target that matters, about making the shot that needs to be made, about not wasting ammunition on things that don't count. She stepped back from the podium. That's all I have to say. Thank you for being here. Thank you for remembering him. Thank you for making sure that what he stood for doesn't die with him. The crowd applauded. It was not loud or long, but it was genuine. The kind of applause that comes from people who understand they are honoring something larger than themselves. After the ceremony, Rhodes approached her. That was good, he said. Your father would have approved. He would have told me I talked too much, Maya said. Rhodes smiled. Probably, he was never much for speeches, but he would have been proud of you, of this, of knowing that it mattered. It's not over, Maya said. Stahl is in prison, but the system that protected him is still there. The contracts are still being written. The equipment is still being pushed. The shortcuts are still being taken. I know, Rhodes said, but we're working on it. The reforms are happening, slowly, but happening. In 5 years, every sniper in the Army will go through the fundamentals course. In 10 years, we'll have a whole generation of shooters who learn the right way. That's your father's legacy, not the plaque, the work. Maya nodded. He would have liked that better anyway. She left Fort Carson that afternoon and drove back to Wyoming. The sun was setting as she pulled into the ranch, painting the mountains in shades of purple and gold. She parked the truck and walked out to the firing line. The Sharps was waiting there, leaning against the shooting bench where she had left it that morning. She picked it up and felt its familiar weight. 45-70 government. Falling block action. Octagonal barrel. The same rifle her father had carried for 40 years. The same rifle she had used to prove his point at Fort Carson 6 months ago. She loaded a single round, walked to the 1,000-meter target, sat down cross-legged the way she had been taught, raised the rifle, found her sight picture in the fading light. The wind was moving through the valley from the northwest, 10 miles per hour, gusting to 12. She watched it move through the grass at 500 meters, at 700, at 900, read its patterns, felt its rhythm. Then she fired. The distant clang of metal on metal echoed back across the valley 2.3 seconds later. Center mass, just like always. Maya lowered the rifle and sat in the gathering darkness, listening to the wind and thinking about her father and everything he had taught her about patience and precision and the particular courage it took to stand alone when standing alone was the only option. She was not alone anymore. The work was being carried forward by others, by Rhodes and Hollis and Santos and all the soldiers who had learned that the old way still worked, that fundamentals mattered, that technology was a tool, not a replacement for skill. But sitting here in the Wyoming twilight with the wind moving through the valley and the rifle across her lap, Maya felt her father's presence in a way she had not felt since the day he died. Not as memory, as continuation, as proof that what he had built could not be destroyed by discharge or death or the passage of time. The shot was not the point. The point was everything that came before the shot and everything that came after. She stood and walked back to the house as stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Behind her, the valley held its breath. The grass bent and straightened in the wind. The targets waited at their distances. The rifle rested against the bench, empty now, ready for tomorrow. Some things ended. Others just changed shape and continued. The work was never finished, but it was being done, and that was enough. I spent weeks researching this story because it touches something we've lost. The idea that real skill takes years to master, not a weekend certification course. Maya's father paid the ultimate price for standing up to a system that valued profits over people. She finished what he started, not with anger, but with precision. What struck me most? The Rangers who laughed at her rifle were the same ones who stood with her against a general. That's what honor looks like. What part hit you hardest? Drop a comment below. And if this story moved you, there are more like it coming every week. Hit that subscribe button.